Okay. And like to introduce to you Christian Cavallo, and we were just discussing that yes, Christian's last name, as you would expect, does have some Italian heritage there, but he's been at Schloss Vollrads since 2003 and is now the sales director there. So fantastic to have you joining us tonight, Christian. And to take us through an excellent lineup of wines. So I'll hand over to you.
Yeah, hello, good evening to New Zealand. Yeah, thank you very much, Liz, for this very warm introduction. I'm really, excited for these tasting. I've never done it so far around the world, to be honest. Yeah, we have here, we are 9 o'clock in the morning. I just actually renounced this morning on a cup of coffee. I started with Riesling this morning. Yeah, so most of the people think working in the winery means that we actually start in the morning drinking wine, and in fact today it is that way. Yeah, a great opportunity for us. Thank you, Liz, for organizing this event and giving us the opportunity to acquaint your customers, your New Zealanders, with our wines. And I would actually start to give you some information about where we are located, actually, to give you an overview, a bit about our philosophy, of course, and we would like to work a little bit with pictures to see, I hope you see it well in the back, the castle. Schloss is the German word actually for castle or palace. Or like the French have most of the times better expressions or explanations or words. They say chateau, which sounds very nice. Or in my father's language, Italian, they would say castello. Yeah? In German it is Schloss, and I have to apologize. I know Schloss Vollrads is not really easy to pronounce for English native speakers, but it's the historical name of this castle, of this palace. And Vollrads was actually, or most probable, the name, the family name, the last name of the knight family that established and developed the palace, the castle, from the beginnings of the 13th century. Yeah. Liz already started with the first slide. We don't want to make a complete PowerPoint presentation. I just want to show you some pictures at the beginning, and then we switch to the first wine. I suppose all of you have already put out the first, and I will do the same. It is 2018 Schloss Vollrads, of course. And the name of the winery is Mittelheimer Edelmann. This is we're in the middle of the German designations, in sense of we have always very long words and terms. And in simple fact, it is a single vineyard from the commune Mittelheim, from the village Mittelheim, and the name of the vineyard is Edelmann. And I will come back to the wine in a few seconds or minutes. Let's first of all start with the first slides list, and let's see where Schloss Vollrads is actually located. Yeah, Germany, in the core, in the heart of Europe. We're on the northern side of the Alps. I know you also have some Alps on the South Island. The European ones are probably a little bit higher and wider, but the Alps are important, of course, also for the rainfalls, because they stop the clouds coming from northern sea. And so you see that most of the wine-growing areas of Germany are located in the southwest of Germany. The Rheingau, where is one of the 13 wine-growing areas, you can see listed on the sheet. And the Rheingau is is among the smaller wine-growing areas of Germany, but one with a very long tradition since the High Middle Ages. So it is located on the west of Frankfurt. You see Frankfurt more or less in the center of Germany. And if you take the next slide, we say it a little bit more precise. We see that The Rheingau is located west from Frankfurt. So Frankfurt Airport is, with my Italian driving style, not more than 30 minutes afar. Yeah? That means we're just in front of a huge area of round about 5.5 million inhabitants, because we have Frankfurt, we have Wiesbaden, we have Mainz, so all huge cities, and this area is one of the stronger economic areas of Germany. From the financial point of view of Frankfurt, known as Bank City, and there's a very nice location, 60 kilometers west from Frankfurt. Schloss Vollrads is, if you see on the little map, is located in the core, in the center of the Rheingau, more or less on the 50 degree of latitude, which is still known as the northern outpost for viable viticulture. And of course, we also see the effect of climate change, but still, if you have a look at the general map, you see just very few wine-grown areas really more located north than the Rheingau. You see that all the wine growers are along the Rhine rivers. This is very important, or the Rhine River and its tributaries, because rivers are important to do the wine growing, to be able to do the wine growing here on the 50 degree latitude. Temperature is still, of course, necessary, and a sort of heating in winter times, and in summer times, it's actually soothing the temperatures. Maybe let's go to the next, and we see the next slide and see the beautiful palace complex, or the castle. You see in the center, you see a tower and a moated tower. And this was actually the first building which was erected officially in the 13th century. The first mentioning is by a document is by 1330. And the owner, or the family that erected the castle or established the castle, was known as at the beginning as the Vollrads family, Vollrads, a Latin word, Vollrads, and later became known as the Knights of Greifenklau. Very complicated family name as well, even for Germans. Greifenklau means griffin claw, claw of a griffin. And as a Knights family, they actually definitely participated at knight tournaments, and they had probably a knight helmet which was decorated with a griffin claw on the forehead of the helmet, and that formed probably the family's name. In the following centuries, the family extended the palace complex or the palace facilities by the yellow parts, or yellow buildings. You see the manor house on the south, which is southwest, south in the corner in front of the left. And then we see, of course, the long west wing and the northern wing. The northern wing would be later interesting, because we're going to see also a special cellar later, which is located in the northern wing. On the corner, on the north, on 1 a.m. You can find our own restaurant. So we're running also a restaurant here directly on the courtyard, which is normally open 5 days a week. Normally, because of course Corona in Europe or COVID makes a huge problems for the gastronomic situation, and we just reopened on Saturday, as the incidence numbers are decreasing in the meantime, and we are now lower than 50 currently, which is a very good number currently. On the back side, you see a hall or a facility building, which is actually where all the equipment for the vineyard management is stored. So all the tractors, all the machines, and we use, of course, we use this surface of the roof surface actually for to produce own electricity in the meantime. This is the castle, and the vineyards are surrounding our own property. So we see the vineyards you see here are all owned by Schloss Vollrads, and it's just a part of it. In total, we're running a winery which is about 60 hectares. Maybe we should start to sample or to experience the wine. Liz, maybe we should skip at this moment to the slide number 23 or 22. 22 is, I can see it already.
Sorry, just 1 second, I will find it.
Yeah, of course, no problem. Yeah, no problem.
So
And
slide 22.
yeah, slide 22. Yeah, 22 is showing the vineyard where we're sampling the wine off, and this is quite nice to see and to get an impression, because it is actually from the neighborhood commune, from the neighborhood village. If you see, when you see the picture of the castle, yeah, there it is. Okay, I think we all see it. Yes, perfect. So we see in the background on the left, we see the palace again. You see all the vineyards which are behind the small line of bushes and trees, yeah, in front of the palace, yeah. These are all the Schloss Vollrads vineyards, which are named. The name of the castle is the name of the vineyard, Schloss Vollrads, and is the name of the winery. So 3 meanings for Schloss Vollrads, actually. But this one we have in glass now is actually a Premier Cru, or we say in German, Erste Lage, first vineyard site. Yeah? The French would say Premier Cru, and it is harvested on the plots we can see on the right side of the tree line. So it's actually another commune, the next commune, which is known as which is named Mittelheim. And the name of the vineyard is Edelmann. And the Rheingau and also the other wine-growing areas of Germany have set up a classification system which is actually close to Burgundy. So it's on 4 levels in total. It is on the ground, on the base level, we have the estate wines, which can be actually a blend of the complete region, yeah, from vineyards and communes from the complete region. Then we do have the village wines, where the grapes must derive from just one single commune and village. And we're starting actually the tasting on the upper level of the dry style wines of Schloss Vollrads. So it's the second highest level, yeah? And Mittelheimer Edelmann is a beautiful vineyard, which is on an altitude of around about 120 to 150 meters over 160 meters over sea level. Yeah, this is a very important fact, that the vineyards range in the Rheingau from 80 meters over sea level up to 230. So altitude of the vineyards is very important for the ripening of the grapes, of the Riesling. The Rheingau, by the way, is dominated by Riesling by 80%, or to be precise, 79%. Yeah, so 80% of the Rheingau are planted with Riesling. Yeah? The total acres are around about 7,500 acres in total roundabout, and 80%, I repeat, because it's an outstanding high rate for one single grape variety in the different wine growing areas of the world. So there are not so many where one single grape variety is actually dominating so much. It seems that it finds very good conditions here in our region. And the second important is a very familiar one to you as well, is Pinot Noir. Yeah? Pinot Noir is the second important grape variety, which is about 12% in our region. So both together sum up 93% of the total viticulture surface. And it shows that the cool grape varieties, Riesling and Pinot Noir, find very good conditions here in the Rheingau. Mittelheimer Edelmann is a selection of late harvest, so middle of October, end of October, depending from the vintage a bit. 2018 was one of the warmer vintages in this decade. Yeah, we had warm vintages in 2015. But even more in 2018, 19, and 20. So the last 3 vintages actually were rather dry and warm. But the soil composition we can find here in Mittelheimer Edelmann is a rather deep one. If we skip probably to the next slide list, we can see the bottle, by the way, because I would like to show you the bottles, because you have this smaller tasting bottles, and it's giving us also some additional information. I don't want to read all which is written there. You can do it by yourself. I just would sum up that important is that we have this löss soil, and löss is in aeolic sediment, very young, just 3 million, around about 3 million years old. And on the grounds below, we have this gravel and also partly shell limestone and less and loam, which are giving us very good water capacity, which is very important, especially in the drier years. Less is able to maintain, to hold, and to give back the water to the Riesling grapes and to the Riesling plant and the Riesling rootstock system. Important, and what we perceived in this wine is it has a certain important structure. It's actually not that lightweight, probably as many expect the Riesling to be. We're going to experience that probably later with other styles of our winery. But here we start actually with a wine which is around about 13 alcohol per volume, and it's nearly completely fermented. So it's not for Rheingau levels, it's rather dry, so just around 4 grams. In Germany, a lot of customers are looking always on the numbers. Germans are very technical it's actually a country of technicians sometimes a little bit, yeah. So that's why the slides are actually prepared a little bit also for German customers in sense of they ask for this for the numbers in sense of residual sugar and total acidity. This is just in hint, because important is how the wine percept on the palate. How you percept the wine on the palate, and it's a nice appearance. I feel a lot of ripe apple. This is actually typical for Rheingau wines. Very often that you find a nice, very ripe and persistent apple aroma. But of course, also the yellow fruits, stone fruits, are typical actually for Riesling in our region, especially when later harvested. Edelmann, to explain, Edelmann is actually literally translated, it means the noble man. So it seems that probably this vineyard site was owned in the former times by a noble family or noble member of a family, and it came into the property of Schloss Vollrads a couple of centuries ago in the 19th century. Since the 19th century, it belongs to the property of Schloss Vollrads. Yeah, it is a vineyard site direct adjoining to the core of our property. Yeah? So it's of course also our property, but not the Schloss Vollrads, official Schloss Vollrads vineyard site we're going to sample in the next 2 wines. Yeah? Liz, maybe I offer the opportunity for some question. I don't see any yet, but you have a better overview probably.
Yeah,
any questions?
No, but we've got a lovely comment here from Regan, and that'll perhaps start some comments or questions along. Just, what a great first wine, love the texture. And I think just looking at the technical information you had on that last slide, I think the maceration and the way that's been put together, I agree. It's got a lovely weight to it, Regan. And yeah, Regan's also said he's not usually a lover of dry Rieslings, but really excited with that one. You like them sweeter, Regan?
Yeah. Yeah, I think the second half of this tasting will be yours then.
Exactly. I'm usually more of a fan of the predicate ones, but that was a fantastic wine actually. And I said I'm really excited to have this new range here for the first time. I think we've had the Schlossberg before, but that's the only one. We haven't had the two Premier Cru or the Griffenberg. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to this flight actually.
Okay. Yeah. This is probably, Liz, a good occasion to show the slide number. Let me see the slide number, one of the first ones. Yeah, this is. Maybe we start we go on with number 5, so we get a complete overview, and just show you a little bit around virtually, just to show you the setting. And probably we go on with slide number 5, Liz. Yeah, this is the view. This is actually April time, so that it was not. This photo was not made this year, but last year, and it's showing the palace and the castle from behind, looking south. And you see that we're a little bit far from the riverbank, from the Rhine riverbank. the vineyards in front of the manor, in front of the castle, are all the vineyards of Schloss Vollrads, Schloss Vollrads vineyard site, and we're around about 1.5 kilometers far from the riverbanks. The castle itself and the Schlossberg, which we actually the next wine, and probably if you have the time, or you can use the time until I show you a little bit around, to pour out the next wine, which will be 2018 Schlossberg. Schlossberg means Castle Hill or Palace Hill, better. And this is a site which I can show you probably on the next picture list. Yeah, we see it. This is actually showing both Grand Cru, so both, as we say in German. In the meantime, we say GG, which means großes Gewächs, great growth. Yeah, but Grand Cru is probably the more international term. So we'll go on to use GG or Grand Cru for you. And probably this is a beautiful picture made in the later evening or just before sunset. Yeah, but the next slide is probably more interesting. The next picture. Yes, because here we have a view from northwest to from northeast towards southwest. And Liz, if you maybe show, you see on the manor, which is on the around 3 o'clock, yeah, and just in front of it we see 3 plots. 3 plots of vineyards, and this is yeah, the first. This is Upper Schlossberg, Middle Schlossberg, and Lower Schlossberg. This is all Schlossberg, yeah, all the 3 plots, yeah. And this is a classified vineyard as we say großes Gewächs, or große Lage, great side, and the dry wines from the great side are known as Großgewächs. The Germans make it sometimes a little bit complicated. Let's keep it simple. It's our Grand Cru. Yeah, one of our 2 Grand Crus. In brackets, the bigger one, in sense of there are around about 14 hectares, which are, let me multiply, yeah, 60 acres in total are classified as Schlossberg GG, as Grand Cru. But we don't produce on the complete surface this wine. We just take the plots and sites where the vines are older. Our internal minimum age for this Grand Cru Schlossberg is minimum 25 years age of the vines. Yeah, and in the average we're about 35 to 40-year-old vines on this side, and this is important to extract the character out of the different soils and layers we can find here inside of the Schlossberg. The Schlossberg probably is a little bit more multi-layered than the Mittelheimer Edelmann was before. Yeah, in Mittelheimer Edelmann we had this loess and we had a little bit calcareous parts, but in the Schlossberg we have also a lot of quartzite. And I hope, and I think you all have in the meantime poured out the wine. You can see that the color is even a little bit more intense than the color of the Mittelheimer Edelmann. It's the same vintage, 2018, both, but more or less picked at the same time. So the higher intensity of color is a result, of course, also of the different way of manufacturing the grapes. Yeah. What we did in the Mittelheimer Edelmann was actually a partly skin maceration, about 18 hours, 24 hours, just around about a day, and then pressing it gently and fermenting in stainless steel tank. Here, the 2018 Schlossberg, also partly skin macerate. What we actually do is, to be honest, we do different things, is to destem the berries, and to bring whole berries in a cool maceration period for 3 or 4 days. So without any juice contact time, just whole berries put into the fridge container for 3 days, and then we press them after a couple of days. And another part is we do classical skin maceration, so slightly pressing or slightly crushing the berries and keeping the skins in contact with the juice overnight, and pressing them after 24 hours roundabout, and all the different parts and all the different lots of the different pickings of different days are then put in different barrels and casks inside of the North Cellar, which is a special GG cellar, what I would like to show you later on. The higher color is actually a result by these longer maturation times and also by the fermenting of the wine in huge oak casks. Liz, I don't know if you have this picture available. It's actually a later slide, a little bit of after we go, maybe go to the Schlossberg slide, which is about, which should be then 24 around about, I think, yeah. Slide 24.
I know the one you mean. You want the oak or the...
Yeah. To show you a little bit the cellar where the wines are elaborated. Yeah, there we are. Perfect. So the Schlossberg up to the year 2016 was 100% stainless steel fermentation, but we noticed that those wines at that time, or this vintages, needed a long time to balance on the bottle end, because we had a very reductive fermentation without any influence of oxygen on this skin macerated juices. And it needs a lot of time to be balanced on the bottle. And we started to actually equip the old North Cellar, which is actually the oldest cellar on the castle. It's dating from 1650, and it's the oldest cellar. And you see on the left side, you see the old barrels, which haven't been used since the 1980s. So the tradition to use huge oak casks in the Rheingau got a little bit out of fashion in the 1980s. The Rheingau wintners were more pointing on the clear, fresh, sharp Riesling fruit, temperature control, stainless steel tanks. This is, of course, still the way we manufacture most of our wines, and it's important to point out on this way the classical Riesling fruit. But for more dense juices, for denser wines, we need the balancing of a fermentation elaboration in huge oak casks. These are classical Stück barrels. Stück is the German size designation, so it means 1,200 liter cask is a Stück cask. Stück means piece in German. Also the French have the term pièce, piece, but there's a different size then. No? In Germany it's 1,200 liters, so rather huge ones. Important that these casks, even the old ones and not the new ones, are not toasted. Yeah? They are all untoasted. Of course, they get steamed before the first use, and they get rinsed before the first use. And we introduced the first two casks of the newer ones on the right side, the two pictures on the right side. In the upper picture, the first two have been used for the 2016. The next two have been used for the vintage 2017, and another 2 or 3 barrels have been introduced for 2018. So means in the meantime, now vintage 2021 or 2020 was the first vintage where the Schlossberg was in the first year completely fermented and elaborated in huge oak casks. 2018 is actually still a blend of 60% of oak and 40% stainless steel. Just to give you an impression, we're not looking or we're not seeking too much impact in the taste, in sense of that we don't want to season somehow the Riesling by huge oak casks. We're actually looking for the micro oxidation, like is also used in terms for red wines sometimes for the Pinot Noir. It's actually the same discussion, yeah. Putting too much oak into a Pinot Noir also you lose the fruit expression, and it would be the same in Riesling, yeah. This is how we do for the Schlossberg, yeah. Thank you much, Liz, for this beautiful slide showing you old tradition not used anymore, and then reactivating the old tradition with a new cask. This cask, by the way, were very often question posed, how long we do use them. Yeah, actually, our cellar master Jochen introduced them now 2016, and we hope that we're going to use it actually for the next 20, 30, 40 years, actually. Yeah? So this is actually the aim. Yeah? They're definitely more expensive than smaller barrique casks, and so it makes sense, of course, to invest more care and time into this cask. Yeah, yeah, probably. What is your impression? What is your impression, Liz?
Yeah. I particularly like it. We do have a couple of questions. I first of all have one for you. Am I right in thinking that, we never used to see, particularly in your part of Germany, a lot of oak used, perhaps a little bit more Zarua down that way than where you are. Is it becoming something that is being more used now?
Yeah, definitely, especially for these categories of the single vineyard wines. So especially for the Grand Cru section, the classification, it's just a question that probably when I show you the slide, let me see, this is the slide number, yeah, number 16. We have a view of this number 16 to show you the difference of the grapes we manufacture, we use for the different types of wines. Yeah, because that explains maybe why this Grand Crus actually they benefit from to be manufactured in huge oak casks. Probably it appears a little bit unusual, but it was actually the old tradition in the Rheingau. The huge oak casks of 1,200 or 2,400 liter size have been used actually up to the 1970s. But then what happened? The Rheingau windmills didn't invest or didn't take care too much into the cask, and all this old casks developed an own character. Yeah, and do you have the slide number 16, Liz? 16.
Just 1 second while we're doing that. We have been asked whether I can share the presentation afterwards with everyone. Are you okay with that?
Yeah, of course. And
so yes, so for those people who asked, do we have a copy of the presentation? Yes, I have it, so we'll share that afterwards.
Of course, perfect. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, and we've also just had some comments here that the oak seems to have softened the acidity. Is that one of the aims?
Yeah, yes, correct. So we have, you see the typical Riesling crop, which is down below, the longitudinal form, and it's not only that the grapes must derive from a classified site, which is the Schlossberg. It's also the work we additionally put into the sites, and a very important one is, of course, to reduce the yield and the amount of crops, or in this case, as we do, the amount of berries. Because what we actually do is not to remove 2 from 3 crops per vine, but we do a crop design in sense of we use the scissors after blossoming when we see how many berries will develop, and we do this crop dividing or crop halvening in July in order to reduce the amount of berries per rootstock system. In order to get more dense and more expression of the soil, which is, as I mentioned, less loam and a lot of quartzite. Quartzite is a very old Devonian sedimentation of sands, hardly pressed to a very, very hard rock and stone, and it needs a lot of time to go in debris, and it's actually SeO2, so a lot of giving us a lot of raciness into the Riesling, a lot of spiciness, sometimes even flintiness, yeah, and this is what we like to express, and therefore we need to reuse to concentrate the juices and musts for these wines, and this crop designing is necessary also, of course, to protect the crops from possible molds, because what we see on the right side, we see 6 different kind of berries. We see the upper berry, which is a classical normal one for the cabinet wines. We're going to sample as 4th wine or 5th wine. Then we see here a normal berry of cabinet level or of Premier Cru from Mittelheimer Edelmann. And then, of course, from the older wines, from older wines, we very often get smaller berries, and smaller berries are interesting because the ratio between skin and pulp and juice is more towards the skins, and the aroma of the Riesling, or general of all the grape wines, is inside of the skins and not that much on the pulp. And that's why we use and why we make this skin maceration time or cold maceration time, in order to extract the aromas, the terpenes out of the skins, to be transported then into the juice, and then press the grapes after a couple of time in order to extract the aromas. And what we see, but we probably come back later for the dessert wines to explain the blueberries then later. That's not red wine. These are the berries we need for the last two wines, actually. Yeah, Liz?
So Christian, this is the one that you have trimmed, and
Yeah,
this is the normal berry.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah,
correct.
just so that everyone's sort of clear. So at Schloss Vollrads, they go through and actually each bunch take a little pair of scissors and they chop it about here, because you see this bunch is missing this bit. And then they take a little bit out here, and you can see it's a much looser sort of bunch. So the overall volume of grapes is less, but also the way that it's shaped is different, which then means it ripens differently and gives the concentration we're seeing in this wine. That's a okay description, Christian?
Perfect, thank you.
I had a demonstration by Roald when I was there.
Perfect. Yeah, this is very helpful if we make the training on site here sometimes. Yeah. Yeah, back to this to this wine. Yeah, Schlossberg is and so the question was with the oak. Once more, I want to repeat it. It's not our aim to flavor somehow the Riesling and to add additional flavoring to the wine. It's actually just the effect that when we make this skin maceration, we extract the aromas, but we also extract positive tannins. Tannins, like in red wines, at the beginning are a little bit, sometimes too much, a little bit need to be soothed. And there is the point why we use the oak cask, because the oak cask offer a sort of micro-oxidation. And this micro-oxidation helps on one side to soothe the tannins out of the skins and seeds. And on the other side also, the micro-oxidation helps to take away some peaks of acidity. Yeah? I repeat, we're a cool climate wine growing area still, with an average temperature of around about 10.5. Just, you may know Marlborough was about 12.5, 13 average temperature, I suppose. So we're 1.5, 2 degrees lower than the classical clue climates in New Zealand. And that, of course, we need to balance a little bit the acidity of Riesling. Riesling is one of the grape varieties with a higher amount of acidity, which is, of course, good. And we have to distinguish between the ripe acidities at the end of the harvesting, and at the beginning, of course, we have to balance sometimes a little bit the acidity by deciding for the right picking time, and to wait until the Riesling acidity balances in the vineyard, which is actually the best way. And so this is the meaning, or this is the sense of using huge oak cask again, because we manufacture the grapes differently than we do for the entry level, for the basic wines. We see here on the probably I don't know if the presentation is running. No, it's currently on the back side. If you see the view we have on the slide number, what would be interesting is the slide number 8, Liz, because it's showing an overview from behind. And we see that Schloss Vollrads is more or less located between the riverbanks and the Rheingau, the Taunus hills, which are on the backside of the Rheingau. Rheingau means, by the way, Rhine County. Rheingau means Rhine County. And this is a photo from north to south. And Schloss Vollrads is located on the halfway between the riverbanks and the Taunus hills. And the Taunus hills actually reach 650 meters, 680 meters over sea level. And they are completely wooden. And what we see here behind the palace complex is the Vollrads nature reserve. This is a small forest, a small nature reserve, which was actually not cleared in the Middle Ages. So it is untouched since the Middle Ages, and it's a nature reserve. And so all there are no trees cleared anymore, and so the different kind of woodpeckers can develop, a lot of different insects. So it's something we actually we're proud about to have it. And because of course, what I didn't mention in the meantime, we're moving over in the transition period of organic farming. That means since 2011-12, we started to work partly organically in the vineyard. So some plots have been worked organically and other ones classically. And with the vintage 2019, we switched to the complete organic farming for the complete surface. And so our nature reserve, organic farming are meantime part of the philosophy, and to be a commitment for the future generations, actually, to keep our soils best maintained and well treated over generations. I would suggest to move to the next GG, to the next Großes Gewächs, to the next Grand Cru, which is 2018 Greifenberg. By the way, if you see this slide, or this is of course summing up a little bit our tradition. It was written in the advertise for this event that Schloss Vollrads is one of the oldest, perhaps the oldest wine estate in the world. It's always a question how we define that, because of course there are a lot of monasteries, not only in Germany but also in other regions, which have a long-lasting, over century tradition. But Schloss Vollrads can point out definitely some documents which are the oldest one we can find in the world. And one of, for example, the most important one you can see on the slide here is a copy, or a photo better in this case, of the oldest wine invoice in the world, still existing. It's dating from 18 November of 1211. It's quite curious that at that time the invoices were having more words than numbers. Today is a little bit different. We have more numbers than words. But at that time, the family members sold wines to a monastery, to Mainz, and the monks of the monastery in Mainz, they stored this document over centuries, and it's now exposed, or can be found in the city archive of the city of Mainz, which just 20 minutes far from here, which is an old bishopric city, and was very, very important bishopric in the Middle Ages and later on. And this is the invoice of the first wine sales, or the oldest wine sales invoice, and it's dating from 1211. And we'll come back to this story probably with the next wine then. But here is the 2018 Greifenberg. And if you have the opportunity, let's see the Greifenberg on the picture, which you just can skip. Probably it's easier for you, probably slides. It's just skip. Oh, no, we have to skip a little bit more. It's about 25 or 24 should be, or even 25, 26. Even one more of this. Here we have, and we have taken this picture from the upper end, the upper border of the Greifenberg. So Greifenberg, not far away from the palace, just very close to the palace complex again. This shows that this nature reserve, and that's why I explained that also, the Vollrads forest and the nature reserve, they are actually protecting our vineyard sites in front of the manor and on the sides from cold air streams, which can form on the upper part, on the upper areas of the Rheingau, in which then normally tend to run down like lava in November and October, September, October, November, which can run down and which actually stop a little bit development and the ripening of the grapes. And that's why the Greifenberg and the Schlossberg are probably the vineyards which are best protected from cold air streams. And this is a classical effect of microclimate. The Greifenberg, if you have put it out already, is the same vintage, so very interesting to sample 3 single vineyard wines from the same vintage. And let's see how it's appearing on the palate. It was actually just the second vintage that we presented this wine on the market. So 2017 was the first edition of single vineyard Greifenberg. In former times, it was also elaborated separately and delivered a beautiful Spätlese, which we have at the later wine in our tasting. And so we always very interesting vineyard for late ripening crops of our winery, of our Rieslings. And the soil composition is a little bit different. We're just 200 meters afar from Schlossberg. Yeah, you can see the Schlossberg, which is just in front of the manor. So it's just a walk of less than 1 minute. Yeah? 1.5 minutes, and you're from Greifenberg to Schlossberg. But the soil composition is definitely different because a little bit more deeper, probably a little bit less quartzite, but a little bit more loam, a little bit more heavier in soil composition. And that's also why the wine is a little bit more, probably a little bit more structured, or in sense of a little more heavier in brackets, in positive sense, than the Schlossberg. It is a very small amount we produce every year. It's just 1 hectare where we make the selection of grapes. 1 hectare, 2.5 acres. So it's one among the smaller vineyard sites in the Rheingau. Actually, it's, no, to be honest, it's the smallest single vineyard in the Rheingau. Yeah? Which in total, it's 1.8 hectares, but we select just out of 1 hectare and make just 2,000 bottles a year, yeah? Not more. Very small quantity, very limited, and it is our reserve Grand Cru, or GG, means that this wine stays for 18 months in the huge oak cask. It is 100% new oak cask, so it's the first transition into this cask, the first fermentation, and it was 100% spontaneous fermented. So we used actually the yeast coming out of the vineyard, and additionally we selected own yeasts, of course, also from our own vineyards, with the help of different with the help of the Research Institute of Geisner, which is close to us, just 5 kilometers afar. And this selection of own yeasts leads, of course, to a more secure fermentation. Yeah. So we did this in connection with 3 different tastes of students. So their goal was, or their aim was, to select different kind of yeast strains and to make several fermentations out of the yeast strains and to find out which one is probably the most interesting one coming out of this own single vineyard site. So, and now we have the opportunity to order this yeast strain every year in a laboratory and to use it for our Greifenberg and also for our Schlossberg as well. So 2 different yeast strains for Greifenberg and for Schlossberg. Yeah. So this is our way to point out the terroir, as the French say. So the origin of the grapes, there's this very special character of the origin. Yeah. It's a little bit softer in the acidity perception probably than the Schlossberg. For the experts, this wine went into malolactic fermentation partly, and that's why the wine is a little bit softer from the acidity perception. Yeah. When we presented it first, I said, "Oh, this is something very new from Schloss Vollrads." Yeah, and admit, in comparison to the more acidic style of our Riesling wines, for normal wines or medium level wines, it is of course something totally different. But it's, for me, as an Italian always try to find out which kind of food could fit to this wine. Yeah, so it's, for me, it's a food pairer. Yeah? Or as Italians sometimes say, also a meditation wine. Yeah, so in sense of to be enjoyed in front of the chimney, even probably a white wine for the cooler times in the year. And with nice creaminess at the beginning, but then at the end, you still percept this typical Riesling freshness, and I think it's a nice balance, and would be interesting to go on the next vintages with this wine. Yeah, giving you the opportunity for questions, Liz.
Yeah, it's interesting. You've referenced a couple of times in your description there of it, talking about France, and I think there's some techniques there that look like a little bit like you're playing with Chardonnay, but it's distinctly Riesling. It's got like this sort of French nuance across it. So it's very interesting. I can see though anyone who's tried your wines for many, many years would perhaps look at that and go, hold on, where are we going? What's happening? Because that's very different.
Definitely, but we still have, of course, the classical Rieslings in our portfolio. So I think we're gonna see that later on with a Cabernet wine, which is one of our signature wines by tradition. Yeah, the term Cabernet derived here in Schloss Vollrads, and we still have, of course, also customers. Definitely, what we're talking about, by the way, this is our annual production is less than 2.5 to 3% of the wines we're sampling now. Yeah? So just to give you a relation, it gives you a relation between the classical style and these. Yeah, some people say this is Burgundy style. Yeah, so in effect, of course, probably we have now the climatic conditions the Burgundy had a couple of centuries ago. Yeah, so we're moving a little bit from the temperatures towards Burgundy, and but we still have, at the moment, when we see these 3 warm years, 2018, 19, and 20, we actually had no problem with too low acidity levels, to be honest. So still we have enough acidity to point out the Riesling character. So many Germans are fearing that the Riesling will lose its character. It might happen in some vineyard sites which are too warm, of course, but altitude is an important fact. So our Grand Crus are located 160 meters over sea level and higher, and every 100 meters over sea level higher, it means 1 degree less or more, depending on if lower or higher. So I think in future time, in the Rheingau, where the vineyards extend from 80 to 300 meters, of course, the higher vineyard sites will be the more interesting ones from tension in the wine, from that point of view. And it will be interesting to see how the next generation will be able to work with this grape variety here in the Rheingau. But of course, as you said, with the Greifenberg, we are still at the beginning of a process. This is the second vintage we bought, and we still think that we can improve. And we still have to understand a little bit the very special individual character of this Greifenberg vineyard side, and will be very interesting in which direction this wine will develop in the future decades, but also in the next vintages.
Yeah. So obviously with this one, you don't have, unless you've got some trials from previously, an indication of how it would age. But with the first 2 wines that we looked at, particularly Schlossberg, the Schloss Vollrads, what sort of aging potential do you think there? And
aging potential is always a potential, or it's always a question about option. In sense of you're not obligated to use that time. It's actually a question of personal preference, but the aging potential, what we see in this wines, or what we expect as actually is at least 10 years. 10 years at minimum. And when we see the range of this Schlossberg wines, which the first Schlossberg actually manufactured or produced in the way how we produce it today is 2012. With the exclusion that we didn't use any oak at that time, but from the way how we manufacture the vineyard, starting from the vineyard, 2012 with the crop dividing and scissoring, and when we sampled the 2012, it's still outstanding good. Actually, at the first 2-3 years, it was not that good how it is now. Yeah? So we still have a couple of dozens of bottles in our cellar, and we use it for vertical tasting. So we offer that kind of tasting here on site normally. 6 vintages of Schlossberg vertical tasting, and this is very interesting also for me to see how interesting or how positive the aged versions of Schlossberg are accepted by not always professional tasters for this kind of event. Yeah? And so 2012 is now very nice to be enjoyed. 2014, very elegant, very sharp and precise. And 2017 was very successful by international wine tasting in Vienna, in Austria. You must know German wine producers and Austrian wine producers are always a little bit in a competitive situation, and it was actually awarded being the best white wine of this competition in Austria in 2018. Yeah, so Schlossberg won the prize of the best white wine of the competition, and it shows us that we're going into the right direction. And aging potential, as you said, is important. But many customers in Germany actually don't wait that long. Yeah? They enjoy the wines after 2, 3, 4, 5 years. And I think this is actually the minimum time. Yeah? So you have now in sale 2018, and I think it's nice to have it now. But if you want to keep it for another 2, 3 years with not optimum cellar, it would work. Yeah. It's also a question of cellars sometimes. Yeah. I don't know how many cellars are available in New Zealand. if they're widely spread, or of course you can use the fridge, the special wine fridge is also an option, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there was a fantastic analogy there, Christian, because we often get asked about cellaring, and I often say to people, if you're enjoying drinking it right now, then just drink it. Question. Yeah.
The best, as a sales director, I would say the best wine you can have is the one you have drunk already, which has been enjoyed. Yeah. But I'm a wine lover, wine passionate as well. So of course I see the potential for the wines, and I would describe it from 2 points of view. Yeah? So when we bring the wine in sale, it's nice. It's ready to be enjoyed, but it can stay for next 10 years actually without a problem. They are all sealed with screw cap. In the meantime, we're going to have the next wine now, I suppose. It's the 1211. Yes. I take it out from my fridge. And yeah, this is, I put it into not in front of me. Okay, I understand. Yeah. I'm not so Zoom expert, so but probably we have a picture as well on another slide. And following the Greifenberg slide, we're going to see the picture of this of the label, because this is a very special story behind this wine. And in the meantime, I will pour it out in my glass as well, because now the color will be more intense. Here we have it. I showed you this old wine invoice picture before, and yeah, and in the year 2011, easy calculation, we celebrated 800 years of wine selling tradition. And in this year, we decided to produce a very special wine in occasion of this anniversary. And we thought about to do something out of the line, out of the normal style of Schloss Vollrads, and our idea was, what could we do to express this long tradition? And we thought, hey, let's try to produce the wines how they probably have been produced in former times, especially from the grape manufacturing, or how the grapes have been handled after picking. Yeah? And in the high Middle Ages, they didn't have that time to process the grapes that fast. They had smaller basket presses, for example, or even beam presses, and they needed a lot of time to refill the presses. So very often the grapes started to ferment even before they had been pressed. And and what we did here is something very special. We took grapes from Schlossberg and from Greifenberg, from our 2 Grand Cru sites. and selected again from the older plots, and at the late ripening period, so at a very high ripening level, the maximum which is possible, even just before the skins get a little bit red colored, or not red. Red is the wrong word. Bronze, probably bronze colored, and this is always a sign of over ripeness. So just before we harvested the grapes, avoiding any botrytis, so no noble rot, which influenced too much on the aroma profile of the juices. And we did a sort of fermentation inside the berries. So this is called in French maceration carbonique. So there's a fermentation inside of the berries, and this leads to very special flavors, and of course also extraction of skins, of tannins out of the skins and of the seeds. In this case, no cooling was made, so temperature went up to 26, 27 degrees of Celsius. So a very, very oxidative way to produce or to ferment white wine. It actually, to be honest, in the first 30% of the fermentation, it was produced nearly close to red wine. So probably, of course, not to pushing down that much the skins below the juice or fermenting wine, but actually we made a fermentation. After this maceration carbonique, we made a fermentation also on the skins, so for a good third of the length, and this led to a very intense extraction of tannins. And in the nose, it's showing a very, very, very unusual flavor, which is reminding me, of course, honey is of course evident a lot, but also a sort of cooked apple, a little bit, or baked apple, I would say in German. A lot of spiciness, herbal spiciness, which comes from the tannins, from the skins. And in the first years, this wine was very, very difficult to drink, but it had a lot of tannins, and it needed a lot of time in the bottle. But it got actually its oxidation time during fermentation. So since, I would say, 2016, 17, the wine actually didn't develop anymore on the bottle. This is incredible. This is incredible. This wine stayed stable for a couple of years now, and it's very, very interesting to see. Now I haven't in bottle, I had it in glass for more than a couple of months now, for half a year, and there's definitely no difference in the last 2-3 years I sampled the wine. This is our interpretation actually of an orange wine somehow. This is a typical. It was an experiment, something very special. We produced in a small amount of bottles, just something out of the line. And what we used actually to express the tradition of the Schloss Vollrads anniversary, or the time of the anniversary, is actually that we used a label which was used for the 1860 wines. So this is original label from 1860, a classical Schloss Vollrads label from that time. And I find it actually beautiful. I like this old-fashioned labels very much. I actually would like to have it on the Schlossberg again. Also, by the way, we took this old traditional label as an idea for the current Schlossberg label as well. This is the modern way now on the Schlossberg. Maybe there are some questions. Liz?
Yeah, I mean, Christain, it's a fantastic wine. What a treat to try it. Question would be why you've decided to use the Vinterlock closure on that wine, and why screw caps on the others? So
good question, and of course important question. We actually moved, or I have to from the beginning. Sorry. we noticed a clear decline of cork qualities in the 1990s. Yeah. So when I started here in 2003 on Schloss Vollrads, I was still studying winemaking and wine growing in the Research Institute of Geisenheim, close by, just 10 minutes far by car. And I worked here in the winery in the events and prepared the wines for the functions, so wine tastings, but also for banquets. Yeah. And I was working with wines which had been sealed at that time with natural cork. And then in a function with 100 guests, of course, you need at least for the first pouring, you need 12 bottles roundabout, 10 bottles. So when I took a wine from the 1990s or even older, sometimes I noticed that after opening 12 bottles, I had 3 to 4, 5 different parties. Yeah, the normal development, the slightly more aged development, the one which is actually slightly oxidized, and the fourth party were the classical cork cane party. So very difficult, difficult to decide which wine could be poured out and which one not. And that led us to the decision to introduce, with the presentation of the Vinolog in 2003, to introduce the sealing system for our wines since 2004. So vintage 2004 was the first vintage at Schloss Vollrads where we used for the complete range of our wines. Here we are. We used the Vinolog. It was, as I repeat, it was presented just in 2003, and we were the second winery worldwide to introduce it for the complete range of our wines, starting from the basic level up to the dessert wine categories. This was okay for a long time. In the first 2 years, we had to put on the stopper by hand on the bottleneck. And as you might know, in connection with certification, food certification is actually not allowed to work that much by hands in the bottling process. And that's why we asked the German company who has distributed the sealing system, the Vinolog, if a machine would be, a placer would be available. And at that time, there was no placer available because it was just at the beginning of the development. And I said, okay, let's develop a placer together. And we did that at that time. And the first prototype was actually running here at Schloss Vollrads. Schloss Vollrads was the first winery worldwide to use an own placer for this Vinolog sealing system. You must know we produce a year round about 500 to 600,000 bottles of wine, about a complete range of different types of Rieslings. And all our wines have been sealed with the sealing system. So we wanted to avoid that our employees or our staff members, trainees, and young staff members had to put on the stopper every year by hand. And of course, it is not that fast. It's not so fast possible like a machine is able to put out on a bottleneck. So, and this was okay. But in the meantime, we noticed in the last 10, 15 years that this sealing system unfortunately did not spread that much, was not so successful as the screw cap was in the same period. You as New Zealand wine producers, you all know that the screw cap is widely spread, especially for white wines in the meantime, and also accepted. But this placer problem came up again because we had to renew our placer of that time, and the company we worked together to develop this placer is not existing anymore. And we were looking in the meantime if the market could offer us a new placer fitting to our dimension of winery, amount of bottles we need to bottle, and there was actually no placer available. And being certified in different international certifying standards, it's not allowed for us to put on a stopper by hand anymore on the bottleneck. And this is a simple reason why we decided to move away and to renounce on the glass stopper. Me personally, from image point of view, from the aspect, from all the different kind of positive arguments, it's actually a pity on the one side, but we know that we're using now a sealing system which is from the technical point of view on the same level, definitely at least at the same level, and the acceptance of the screw cap is in the meantime the same. So I think it would have been a different decision in 2004. Switching from natural cork to screw cap at that time would be harder step at that time.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
We've been wondering why the change, and we've been having some discussion about it. We'd guessed some of that, but it's perfect to hear the whole story. So Thank you very much. And certainly screw caps, obviously for us here in New Zealand, are absolutely no problem.
Yeah, definitely. This is, as I mentioned, taking the decision of a screw cap in 2004 would have been a very, very extreme decision at that time, but 20 years later is actually not a problem anymore. Yeah? Or 10 years, 14 years later. I would decide to switch to the next wine. Liz, would you say? Okay.
Perfect. Yeah. So, okay. Guys, we're going to move to the next flight now. So you need to rearrange what you're doing and sort that out. Oh. Christian, perhaps just give everyone a couple of minutes. We've got some people who don't have their fridges close as you. So hold on, let me just check that everyone is back again.
No problem at all. No problem at all. Yeah, we're actually moving now away from the dry style section.
I think we're good. We're good now.
Yeah.
And Christian, a little bit like you, where you probably don't need the fridge right now. Those who are in Wellington, so south of where I'm located, their house is cold enough that they don't need a fridge. A little bit like your temperature at the moment.
Yeah.
We have a question though for you. Serving temperature.
Yeah, serving temperature, very important. Always in the right temperature. In sense of, it is a question of structure of the white wine. So we started our tasting with the more structured whites, showing 13, even up to 13.5 alcohol by volume. So these wines are best, for me personally, served at 10 degrees, but they can be enjoyed up to 13, 14 degrees. So the more structured the whites are, the Rieslings are, the slightly warmer they can be served. Yeah. On the opposite way, if we're going to the light style Riesling styles, so we have a wine here in our winery which is called the Summer Riesling, which is a very, very light and fresh and is citrus aroma driven Riesling. This is best actually below 8-9 degrees of Celsius. So 7-8 would be the serving temperature for this wine. With the wines we're going on now, with the Cabernet and with the Spätlese, I would suggest to do a serving temperature of 8 degrees, and if they reach then 10 in the glass is also okay. But there's a question also of age of the wines. Yeah, so young Riesling, in my opinion, can be served a little bit cooler, but the older the Rieslings get, the more interesting is to have them at a slightly warmer, means always 1, 2, 3 degrees warmer. Just this is actually my impression and my opinion, but yeah, in the wine world, a lot of different opinions are allowed. So up to you, definitely. Just check it out. I'm using sometimes the term just to balance my impression or to prove my impression. I'm using definitely a wine thermometer in English, also thermometer to examine the temperature. What's it called in English? Oh, I'm missing the word. Sorry. Yeah, so just to check the temperature of the fridge. So, but in summer times, for example, sitting on the terrace on the balcony, always better to give more temperature, to have it chillier and cooler, because actually in the glass it gets warm by itself. So always a luxury problem if the wine is too cold, in my opinion.
Yeah, very good. I think everyone has the wines now.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah, 2018, still the vintage we're going on. So it's also, this is also good, by the way, a good thing that we sample 6 different wines from the same vintage. So I think it's easier for you to get an impression what, of course, picking time. And this is a question because now we have an earlier picking time for this wine, for the Cabernet. we're in the middle of the harvesting season. The wines we sampled up now, the 4 wines before, are really at the end of the harvesting season, so very late picking. Yeah, and now we're getting a bit into the middle of the harvesting season, and I think we get a totally different style, not only by the picking time, but also, of course, how we work the grapes then in the cellar, and how we work with the wines then later on in the cellar. Yeah, let's sample it together. Cabinet, vintage 2018. Again, now what we can find now on the label is an additional term. In this case, it's Winkel, and Winkel is the name of the village where Schloss Vollrads is located in. Or part of it, of the commune territory. Winkel is the city with village, small village. It's about 3,000, 4,000 inhabitants just. And so this is a wine which has been selected, where the grapes have been selected just from this vineyard sites which are located inside of this commune, inside of this village. Yeah, in Burgundy they would call it a village wine or village wine, and this is the second category or the second step on the pyramid of quality levels of the classification, which has been introduced in 2012 for the VDP wineries. And so we have to explain. Sometimes you find on the list the term VDP. VDP is an association of wine producers in Germany. It's a very historical one, which was founded in 1897, so more than 120 years now. And Schloss Vollrads was one of the founding members of this association, which was, in simple words, is or in soccer terms better, it's the Champions League of the wine producers in Germany, summing up the 200 best wine estates in Germany from different wine-grown areas. And this association, the VDP, means Association of Predicate Wine Producers. Predicate is the German word for attribute to a wine, and the attribute we can find here on the label is Cabinet. And Cabinet is a very, very important designation for wine, which has its origins here on Schloss Vollrads. The Cabinet wines have been the better wines of the 18th century. After the 30 Years' War, which was a very hard period in Europe, especially in Germany, in the center of Europe, it was a 30 Years' War between Catholics and Protestant bishoprics and kingdoms and dukedoms, and a lot of people suffered and died. And so also wine growing, of course, was affected, because actually there were missing people doing the work, the agriculture work at that time, so especially wine producing. So just at the end of the 17th century, so 1680, 1690, the first really good vintages came up again in the Rheingau. And the Greifenklau family at that time, residing here on Schloss Vollrads, decided to establish a very special cellar, a sort of reserve cellar, the so-called cabinet cellar. And the cabinet is in German a term for small room, very special room, also synonymous for treasury. And the Greifenklau family stored the best wines of a vintage in this cabinet cellar, a very small and tiny one, just offering space for, I suppose, 5-6 barrels, not more. And they sold that wines then a little bit later, a couple of years later, at higher price levels. And those casks, at that time, the wines, by the way, were sold in complete casks, not in bottles. Yeah, the bottles came up much later in the 18th, 19th century. And they sold these wines then branded on the cask as Cabinet wine. So they put on a brand on the cask, this is a Cabinet wine. And those slowly, this designation developed in the 18th century. It's one of the oldest quality classifications in the wine world, probably the oldest ones. We all know probably the classification of port wine, which came up much later in the 18th century. We know about, of course, the Bordeaux classification from 1855, where complete wine estates have been classified. But the term Cabinet is actually was first mentioned here on Schloss Vollrads by a document in the year of 1716. So in 2016, we celebrated 300 years of Cabinet tradition here on Schloss Vollrads. It's a very important wine for us. This is the semi-dry version. In German, we call that Feinherb, so fine dry. In English, would be semi-dry or medium dry. So it's not completely fermented. We stop the wine at a certain point in the fermentation. It is 100% stainless steel fermentation, so temperature controlled. So rather the modern way of Riesling interpretation of the 1990s, 2000 years. So when the stainless steel fermentation came up in the Rheingau was late 80s, early 1990s. No? What comes out in the cabinet wines, and then I perceive that because of course I'm a little bit more used to our wines than you probably, but the first impression, oh, flintiness. Yeah, I find this sort of flintiness which comes from the soils here around the Palace complex. The quartzite influences a lot the perception of our Riesling. Riesling in general is probably the grape variety which is, as I sometimes describe it, as a sort of CSI, so crime scene investigation grape variety, in sense of it's taking the fingerprint of the soil composition of the microclimate. It's one of those grape varieties which is able to express differences in soil composition and climatical condition much more than probably other grape varieties. And that makes it for us so interesting. And even inside of the Rheingau, which extends over 35 kilometers from west to east, yeah, you can find very, very different Rieslings according or depending from the soil composition, from the microclimatical conditions, and of course, by the philosophy of the vintner. And what is very typical for this cabinet of Schloss Vollrads is flintiness that I can find in the nose, which comes out after 2-3 years of bottling or aging on the bottle. And yeah, semi-dry, a little bit more fruity in style. The alcohol is around 12. As I mentioned, 2018 slightly higher. Normal vintage would show 11, 11.5. But that's still, I think it's quite balanced. The alcohol is well integrated, and the fruit expression is here, I think, which is the most interesting or the most valuable part of this wine, the fruitiness and this soil composition expression in sense of flintiness. Yeah, when you scratch two quartzite rocks one to each other, and you smell at this two quartzite rocks, it smells like like Firestone, yeah, like Flintstone better, yeah. And yeah, this is very, very nice to have. And important is that this is the wine which can be enjoyed in different occasions. You can have it, in my opinion, you can have it as a single standing, enjoying it just as a single wine in the afternoon or late Sunday morning, yeah, and as an aperitif, for example, before lunchtime. But it's also nice to have it, of course, with fine dining, with food which has a certain elegancy, not too intense, of course. You can pair it sometimes, but also with some spicy food. I just get information. Do you hear me still?
Yes, yeah, we do. That's
Perfect.
fine. Just we had a comment here just on the alcohol, and just wanted to check, have I got it right here also in saying this is 16 grams residual? Yeah, correct. Yeah. Yeah, and 7.5 grams total acidity for those who are interested, which I think because the question was sort of around the 12% alcohol being a little bit higher than was expected for this wine. But I think when you balance out, the alcohol with that residual sugar and then the total acidity there, you can see why it tastes like it does. And hopefully those who ask those questions, that has answered it. I'll put those stats into the chat box so you can see them there. Yeah, in effect, we offer this cabinet wine in 3 different styles. We offer it as a dry style version. We offer it as a semi-dry, like you presented in this tasting. And
it's of course also available as an off-dry fruity sweet style. And the difference is actually just the length of fermentation. Of course, probably in the dry style, we make a longer least contact time than afterwards, because a little bit easier with the dry style wines to do it with the dry style wines than with the sweeter styles, because with the sweeter styles, always risk that the re-fermentation starts. So the fruity sweet style is stopped actually after 2/3 of fermentation, is showing then between 8 to 9.5 alcohol per volume, depending from the vintage. And the medium dry is always between 11 and 12. And the dry style is between 11.5 and 12.5, depending from the vintage. Yeah, and but the grape quality, the origins of the grape is the same vineyard, is the same way how we manufacture grapes before pressing, and just the length of fermentation and probably a little bit of temperatures are different, because for the fruity sweet style and semi-dry, we want to point out a little bit more the fruitiness, and from the dry style, a little bit more the minerality of the soils. That is probably a little bit the use of yeast actually, then, which changes a bit. Important that the selection of grapes is made in a radius of just 400 meters around the palace complex. So all the vineyards in front of the palace complex belong to our property, and the grapes for these wines for the cabinet wines are selected out of these soils, out of these sites, but partly also from Schlossberg. Yeah. So I mentioned that we don't use the complete Schlossberg for the Grand Cru, because some vineyards are not that old, just lower or younger than 25 years, and those vineyards contribute to this wine too. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, it's for those sort of wondering, given the explanation there that there's 3 different styles or 3 different references within the cabinet, and why is it, I guess, the fen herb that we decide to import? I think for me and for what works in terms of the New Zealand market, this style does. And this is, you know, within what we do bring in, this is our main reference point for the wines, and the one that, you know, we sell the most volume of. It's got that nice sort of balance between, it's got lovely richness and a sort of dry finish, but it's got enough sweetness there to be attractive, I guess, to a wider group of customers.
Yeah, sorry, Liz, I don't want to embarrassing you, but you're absolutely right. I agree totally with you, because you cannot carry all the 3 ones. It doesn't make sense, of course. So it makes sense to focus on the medium dry version, because I think for those who are not too used a little bit to the Rheingau acidity of Riesling, it is a very good, let's just say, compromise. Yeah, and I say some people probably might think even that is still dry style, yeah. So even with 16 grams. Just to give you the numbers, a German Riesling to be dry style has to show less than 9 grams. Yeah. So we are more or less the double amount of an official dry Riesling. Yeah. So 9.0 is the maximum level for a dry Riesling actually. Yeah. Yeah, so far about the cabinet, not so much to say. Important, because it was important to say that the style is what I like very much, is this a little bit this ballerina Riesling style. Yeah, so a little bit more feminine, probably. Sorry, I don't find better words for it. We started a little bit more with the masculine Rieslings, more full-bodied, more dry style. But this one is now really dancing on the palate, on the tongue, and it makes a lot of fun. And it's a wine for many occasions, and of course also for many different kind of wine passionate people, I think. And very typical for the Rheingau and for Schloss Vollrads, of course, by the tradition I mentioned before. Yeah.
Excellent.
Okay, let's get to the next one. We're a little bit late, I think. Always the Cavallo effect. Already known here at Schloss Vollrads. Sorry.
You're okay.
Okay, next one is Spätlese. Spätlese. The Germans make jokes about the term because it means late harvest, or late harvest. And in former time, when I started to do the wine tastings here a couple of years ago, oh, this was harvested in the late evening, or no, this is of course a late picking at the end of the harvesting season. You probably remember the picture with the two bunches we had on one of the slides. The greenish one, the classical. This was actually basic quality level, yeah, beginning of the ripening level. And for the late harvest, we're looking actually for the same ripeness level like we did for the Grand Crus, for the Schlossberg and for Greifenberg. So the yield is also a little bit more trimmed down to a lower level, not so extreme like for the dry style, to be honest. That's why the price level is a bit different. Is the question of price is in effect always a question also of yields. Yeah, if you just harvest a half, it's obvious that the price should be a little bit higher. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense to produce a wine. And for the Spätlese, it's the aim is to find fully ripened, healthy grapes. Healthy, I repeat, in terms of not botrytis infected berries. Yeah, generally we always avoid any kind of other molds, of course. Yeah, like any other white wine and red wine producer does. There are different kind of molds existing and active during the harvesting season. But what the option can be around sometimes here in the Rheingau and other wine-growing regions of Germany is the use of the noble rot, the Botrytis cinerea fungus. But this is not an option for this wine. So what we have here is a very, very, very limpid and yeah, a crystalline style of Riesling. Yeah, somehow I would describe it that way. Giving us a impression of yellow fruit, stone fruit, reminding me a nice apricot and peach, and very reductive in style, so very fruit oriented. Just at the beginning of its development. Yeah, so very young still and very juicy still, with a higher amount, of course, of residual sugar, like in the semi-dry one we had before. Yeah, also this one is just 2/3 fermented. So we take very ripe and fully ripened grapes, and we gently press them, and then we get a juice which just gets 2/3 fermented, and 1/3 of the sugar stays in the wine unfermented to sweeten it naturally. Actually, this is about between 70 to 80 grams of residual sugar, depending from the vintage. And it's 100% fructose sugar. And fructose, of course, is the more sweeter or fruitier appearing sweetness. And that's, of course, why the wine is appearing so juicy at the moment still. Yeah? So very, very young still. Maybe the question about age or shelf life or cellar life would pop up at that point. And for me personally, I like to drink them after 3-4 years, to start to drink them after 2-3 years. So it's a wine we can, of course, you can enjoy now if you want, if you want to have this fruity impact on the palate, and it's nice to have it now, but you can keep it really for a long time. Yeah? To be honest, even longer than the dry style wines. Yeah, probably. Yeah, so 25-30 years is actually not a problem. What we do here on site, we have the option, of course, because we have the cellars. We put away every year a couple of dozens of bottles, or 150, 200 bottles every year, and we take them out after a couple of years, 6-7 years, and we always offer, and which is our opportunity here on site, to offer to the customers on site the young version, the current vintage, and a little bit more aged one, so the customers can decide on spot which kind of style or stage of development they prefer, because wine, and this is the most important detail today, is the question of personal preferences. You might already know that. So there's what I talk to you, what I tell you is just my opinion. Yeah, so my opinion, and it's this event today is a beautiful occasion for you to make its own experience and to see what is your personal preferences. And just an idea. This is a nice low level alcohol content, around 8.59 by volume. So it's not a wine to solve any problems anymore. very pure, limpid. Probably the wine Regan expected at the beginning.
Yeah, we've got a comment here that I think is fantastic. And Siobhan, I hope you won't mind me reading it out because it's just perfect. It says, this is toe-tappingly good. I love the residual sugar competing against the searing acidity. Just delightful. Fantastic comment, thank you. And yeah, I think, and I must say, Regan put the flights together for tonight. And I think, Regan, you've got it spot on because, you know, we're now looking at very, very different wines to the first flight of wines. And, you know, it's a fascinating way to look at them.
Yeah, definitely. We described it in German, fruit and acidity gaming, as is a literary translation. So this is what was described in the comment, the interaction between fruitiness and acidity. And this is very important that this wine is showing definitely a nice ripe but present acidity. Otherwise, the sweetness, the residual sugar would make the wine appear rather boring. Yeah? So this is a wine we always point out at least 8. Actually, this wine is or these grapes are harvested according to the acidity level, not that much on the sugar content. Yeah, because the sugar content doesn't matter if it's a little bit more or less. The acidity level is the decision we take if to harvest the grapes or not. Yeah? And this is important that this acidity is rather high and present. And so this is actually the status quo at the moment, fruitiness and acidity perception. But what comes out with aging is, of course, something more towards than this so-called tertiary aromas, reminding us dry fruit, a little bit more honey, of course, yeah, some sort of herbal spiciness. In the Spätlese wines, we sometimes have aromas reminding me orange zest, yeah, and of course this brings different more deepness into the wine, yeah, but it's a total different style then, yeah. So it's up to you to decide if you like this fresh young fruitiness or if you're looking for more this aged aromas then afterwards, yeah? And yeah, I just kind of repeat a question of personal preferences, yeah. To be enjoyed, of course, as the cabinet wine, as an aperitif instead of a sparkling, you know, something sweet, because of course this acidity and also the sweetness is yeah, we're a little bit far from lunchtime here, but it makes it's increasing the appetite level. Yeah? So this is one option to enjoy the wine. The other option, of course, is to pair it in summer times, probably with a nice strawberry salad, yeah, or fruit salad in general. Nice to have it together in this connection with a little bit more of aging. I would pair it all, even with some Asian spices or dishes, Asian spiced, and taking the aged version then, 10 years old, it goes perfectly with fall dishes, so pâtés, so intense, more fatty dishes, and but also with poultry then. So in Germany, in November is very popular to have a goose, a complete goose, and to take an aged Spätlese, it's nice pairing. Getting hungry actually. Very good. Yeah, let's switch to the Auslese list, I think.
Perfect.
Yeah. And in this occasion, you might switch back to the picture with these berries, which was, okay, this is the slide. We can also take slide 20. 20 is also good. And 20. Then switch back to 16 later then.
Okay, just 1 second.
Yeah.
Is that the right slide there?
I cannot see it yet. 20 is showing some crops on a napkin.
Yes,
Yeah.
I think. Do you have that now?
Not yet.
Yeah, I can see it. Hold on 1 second.
Yeah.
How's that? Regan, can you see that?
Oh, the others can see it. I can see it as well. It's okay. So
Okay.
if the others can see it, important. I know the picture, by the way. So it's important that the others see it. Yeah, and now I got it as well. Okay. Yeah, this is the Schloss Vollrads napkin, an idea by Dr. Roald Tepp, our former managing director, who retired partly in December. He's still giving us advice in the export markets and taking care for the export markets together with me as a sales director. But what we wanted to show, these are grapes and crops taken out of the row on the same day, in the same moment. And you see how different ripening levels we can have here on the 50 degrees of latitude. Yeah, it's not that the grapes are all ripe at the same period. To be honest, we see the normal bunches of Riesling. We see also again in the middle level, we see the crop divided crops on the lower part, but we also see grapes which will never get ripe, which is the greenish one on the right hand side. These are crops which are actually on the upper level of the canopy of leaves, which develop later in the period in the year, and which don't get ripe actually here in Germany. Yeah? Probably let's move to the. We have it here on this picture as well. Oh, sorry, we see 5 different berries in this case, and what we have in glass now is Auslese. Auslese is a German word for selection, and it's the next quality level following up the Spätlese. So late harvest is late selection or late picking, and Auslese is selection. And to get to this ripeness level and concentration of juice and concentration sense of sugar concentration, we need the help of the Botrytis cinerea fungus. And the Botrytis cinerea fungus is a very special fungus which affects not only grape wines, by the way, also tomatoes sometimes. So if it's too wet in your garden and you're cultivating tomatoes, sometimes they can affect the tomatoes as well and other fruits. No positive effect on tomatoes, but it can have a positive effect on Riesling grapes if it infects late. So late in sense of with a Spätlese level, with a late harvest level, because the effect of this Botrytis cinerea fungus is that it perfores the skins of the berries. It changes, of course, all kinds of the color. They change from yellow, golden colored to a violet blue color later on. But the most important effect is that the skins of the berries gets perfored in sense of that it gets that the water inside the berry is able to evaporate. So with dry weather conditions after the infection, we get a raisin effect or a dry out effect of the berries in the next weeks or days and weeks. And this doesn't happen in every year. So 2016 we have in glass now is actually the current Auslese vintage in sale. We produced in the last Auslese we produced, actually we have now 2021. Yeah, you see, it's a wine of very special vintages. And 2016 which was the highest level we reached in 2016 for the dessert wine category, yeah, to the Auslese. So this is a mix actually of grapes for the Spätlese level and partly noble rot infected berries, Botrytis cinerea infected berries, which leads to a higher sugar concentration before fermentation. And I think it's evident on the nose. We get a totally different aroma profile, which is not so much on an apple or apricot or peach. This is more now towards quince, more towards tropical hints of tropical fruit, a little bit of pineapple, yeah. But you can also, we're going to do a brainstorming. So if you have other fruits you can find, up to you to mention. Yeah.
without Christian, without making exactly the same comment again, it just, these wines, just the balance between the sugar and the acidity, it's just impeccable. It just, German Riesling does this and everyone else tries to follow it. It's,
this is that, I was raised partly in Italy, so I also know quite well Italian dessert wine categories. We all know about Vinsanto, we know about Sauternes from Burgundy, from Bordeaux, but they are totally different style of the dessert wine category. I think this style of dessert wine category is just possible in Germany, with rather cool climates. In October, when we start the harvesting in the morning, it happens that we have just 2-3 degrees of Celsius. So the ripening period or the aromas of the grape variety are protected by cooler climates in October. The aroma forming, the development of aroma takes place just in the last 2-3 weeks before harvesting. And if it takes place in end of September, October, these aromas get better protected from warmer temperatures than when it happens in August or September. So the loss of aroma is lower and smaller than in other wine-grown areas, but on the other side, we have, of course, a loss of yield by the necessity to cut away crops or part of crops which are not worth to be harvested. So the amount and the production of these wines is always very, very small. So we're happy if we produce this wine, we're happy to have around about 1,500, 2,000 half bottles a year. Once again, I'll give you the relation. We produce between 500 to 600,000 bottles of wine in total, of Riesling to total every year. And if we're able to produce this wine, we have probably 1,000 half bottles, probably 1,500 if the vintage is still a bit more generous. And so it's very, very small amount we're able to produce, and not in every year, because the conditions have to be very special. We need ripe, healthy grapes, then just the infectant by the botrytis, an out drying effect by dry weather conditions, where I repeat, the risk that it rains in October is much higher than in August or September. And every rainfall on these berries would lead to a diluting of the concentration. And but we need a certain sugar concentration to reach the level of Auslese. Auslese is the official designation, the quality level, and it needs to show at least a certain sugar concentration in the juice. Otherwise, it's not allowed to label it as Auslese. And therefore, we need the noble rot. Without noble rot, no chance to produce this wine. And we generally don't see any out drying effects of sun or warm. Exceptions are, it was probably in 2003, which was also very young, very dry year, and we had some out drying effects of the berries at the beginning of the harvesting season. But this is a very, very single effect or single event. Auslese. It's a bit of time that I sampled the wine again, because actually at the moment we're not allowed to pour out any samples in the wine shop, so we can just sell by words, and the customer are not allowed to sample the wine currently. We are open, but no sampling possible, no tastings. And so it's a couple of weeks ago that I sampled it, and I still love it. I admire it as well.
We've got a comment here in terms of some descriptors, and it was liquid honey mandarin, right?
Mandarin.
Heading into tropical candied fruit.
Yeah, perfect. I need to write it down for my next fact sheet.
We'll send it to you.
Yeah, thank you. Perfect. Yeah, no, really, that's just the huge advantage of this kind of events. That we can sum up our impressions and bring them together. Again, coming up, probably the question of aging potential. Of course, the wines we're sampling now, from Spätlese to Auslese, and also the next one, the Beeren Auslese, are wines which can go into a heritage, actually. So in sense of, if you don't want to drink them anymore by yourself, you can pass it over to your children. And this is actually the category of wines are stored, for example, for my daughter. Vintage 2002 was also quite good vintage for the dessert wine categories here in the Rheingau. And these other wines are put away for her. Currently, she's not loving that much the sweet wine. So we have to wait another 10, 15 years probably before she starts to like the sweet styles. The young generation is a little bit more on the dry style wine. But it's worth to put away, definitely. Yeah.
And that is a trend in Germany with regards to the wines that particularly younger people are drinking, isn't it? As a trend more to dry.
Yeah, definitely. Since the but this started at the end of the 1980s. So 1980s, 1990s. In the 1970s, most of the German Rieslings were sweet or semi-dry. And this changed totally, inverted actually in the 1990s. And since the 1990s, so for more than 20 years now, we actually produce, in the meantime, more than 80% dry style. Probably 10, 15%, 10% semi-dry, and another 10% sweet style. So because our domestic market is about 50 to 60% domestic market and 40% export. In the export market, it depends a little bit on the country. So for example, New Zealand, it's nice to see that they take the complete range actually of styles in sense of from dry to semi-dry to sweet. In other countries, they're pointing a little bit more on sweet style, but still, for example, in the US, we have a more sweet style market, semi-dry cabinet. We sampled this fruity sweet cabinet and fruity sweet quality wine. Interesting also is Japan, very interesting. They actually order we produce every year 14 to 15, 16 wines, and they order around about 12 of the complete range. So maybe everybody would expect the Japanese market to be a sweet style market, but in the meantime, it's also inverted more to a dry style. So they order also the dry and the GG wines, the Grand Cru wines. So every market a little bit different. And the nice thing that we had the occasion today, and we didn't reach the end, we still just before the climax actually, is to show that Riesling is so versatile. And this is probably one of the strengths of this grape variety. So it's one of the very few grape varieties which can express perfectly in very, very different styles. Another one is your home country, your home grape variety is Sauvignon Blanc, which is also very nice to experience in dry and also in sweet styles. We have them in Europe, along the Loire River region or in Bordeaux, as Sauternes, for example, is a very Sauvignon Blanc driven. So it's another of these very few white grape varieties which can express the quite complete range of styles. And this is actually the main reason why Schloss Vollrads is focusing 100% on Riesling, and why our claim is called Welcome to Riesling, actually, and why we focus on this grape variety. Okay.
Very much okay. Everyone's very much looking forward to, I can see comments. People have moved to the last one already. Yeah.
Yeah. Give a little bit of time to pour out the wine, but I think
everyone's there now.
Okay. Yeah, last wine of our sampling, something very, very rare. Produced not in every year, even less than Auslese, the so-called Beerenauslese, the berry selection. There's actually Liz, this is the first online wine tasting I have the opportunity just to offer and to show Beerenauslese. This is very, very rare, actually, to be honest. So wirklich a wine, really a wine we produce in a minuscule production. 2010 was a very, very complicated wine vintage for dry style wines. We just produced a very small quantity just of Schlossberg, for example, for the dry style wines. Very, very a lot of work to do selections. We had a very delayed ripening season. So that means we had a rather chilly summertime, and we hoped for an Indian summer then in September, but it didn't come, and it was still very chilly, 10 degrees, 12 degrees. So development in the vineyard didn't go on, and so it was very complicated to get to the different ripeness levels we need for the dry style wines. But then what happened then in the middle of the ripening season, middle of October, we got a high pressure area just above Russia. And this means if we get high pressure over Russia, we get dry weather condition, and we also received a cool wind from east, so from Russia coming. And this very dry and cool wind, important was it was dry, it dried out our vineyards and the berries which had been infected before by the noble rot, by the botrytis cinerea. So we had something very unusual, which doesn't happen very often, that after infection, we didn't look for sunny or dry weather conditions, well, sunny weather conditions, but the outdrying effect was received by a wind. Yeah? The wind coming from Russia over a couple of days, and it led to the effect. And if we see the picture again of the berries, that we get really small raisins or partly on the crop. So it's not always that the complete crop is looking like the single raisin berry we can see on the picture, we saw on the picture before. It's always the need that we harvest the crop, and we have a table in the vineyard, and on the table there are 6 pickers who are taking the crop into their hand and take the scissor and cut away the noble rot infected berries, and then they select the berries according to their dryness level. We see on the picture 3 different infected berries, the still completely round but blue-violet colored, which is the Auslese level. The middle berry is Beerenauslese, and the more raisin one on the right-hand side is Trockenbeerenauslese, which would be actually the next level. Yeah? So we have 3 different huge baskets where they put in these raisins or these berries according their dryness level. So it's a lot of single berry selection effort, and that's why the wine is, of course, called berry selection, because we really select single berries. Yeah? And it takes them sometimes a complete week with 30 pickers to find those berries in our vineyards surrounding the Palace complex, and to sum them up at the end of the week in order to then at the end have 3 glass balloons of 50 liters each. So in 2010, we were just produced and in fact, it was 180 liters of this wine. Yeah? So this is sort of pharmacy winemaking, finding the right berries and putting them all together then for one single pressing. But it's the essence. It's really, in literal words, it's the essence of Riesling. Yeah, very concentrated, dense fruit. Here with a lot of figs in my opinion, a lot of dried figs, a lot of dried fruit, apricots, probably a lot of honey, of course, definitely. But what was interesting on the dessert wines of 2010, that the acidity level was still very high when this dry wind came from Russia. So it's not only that the sugar concentrates up in these berries, it's also the acidity. And if we take a view on the acidity level of this wine, this is outstanding. This is outstanding. I didn't sample it, I have to sample it. This is like a bell on the palate, like a clock bell. This is incredible high acidity level of 15 grams per liter. This is very unusual even for Beerenauslese. Normally we have levels of 9 to 10, yeah, but this is 15 grams. This is something we never achieved anymore from this level that high, like in 2010. So that's why we say 2010, the third wine categories is outstanding. This is so pure, it's so limpid. We had a very precise and very good noble rot, so no side moods we had to avoid, and so 2010 was definitely the vintage for the dessert wine categories. We also made a very good ice wine in that year, which is unfortunately in the meantime sold out. We produced Beerenauslese, we produced Auslese, which is sold out. There have been just a couple of bottles, and this was so nice to order some of them. And this is, to bring them really on the other side of the globe. This is incredible actually for me to find those wines on the other side of the globe and to show what Riesling is able to show actually, in simple words. This is a wine for 50, 60, 70 years. If you have the patience to put it in for the next generation, actually, you can leave it for the next generation. This is incredible.
Yeah. Christian, a couple of things. First of all, just obviously the wines are fantastic, but also really good. I thought you would want to know, having put them into the little bottles and then having tasted these before and trying them now, they're looking superb. Our team that put this together should be very proud because they're looking spot on, which is great. It's always a risk to put wines, like this, particularly things that are so rare, into the small bottles. So no, they're looking great. You'd be very, very happy. We had a couple of questions just here. The first was, did the last two wines see any oak?
No. Generally, starting from all the off-dry wines we sampled in the second flight, all the wines have been just elaborated in stainless steel. The use of oak in dessert wine categories makes sense, in my opinion, when the acidity level tends to go down, to be a bit lower than in the Riesling section, So it can makes sense, for example, for the mentioned dessert wine categories. We heard about before, the Vinsanto or Sauterne, which are elaborated in a small oak cask, because they have lower acidity level, and the oak contributes to the stability of the wine, because of course tannins to replace the positive effect of acidity, tannins of the oak. This is why also the red wines sometimes are having longer longevity, because they receive additional tannins from the oak. But for the Riesling, in this case, we want to express the pure Riesling fruit, or the fruit, transferred in something different by the noble rot, because the aroma you perceive in these last two wines, especially here in the Beerenauslese, is influenced, of course, by the noble rot. It's not just the effect of a late ripening aroma, it's also effect really of this noble rot, which leads to this dried fig or dried fruit character. And this is the classical effect of the Botrytis cinerea fungus. And we want to express this with a clear stainless steel fermentation. To repeat, the Beerenauslese was fermented in glass balloons. 50-liter glass balloons. I think it was four glass balloons, so 180. So it was 3 50 liters and 1 30-liter glass balloon. So a sort of more pharmacy in winemaking. So pharmacy, like making medicine. So in small amounts, in small quantities, and bottled in half bottle. And actually. A heritage for the next, also for the next employees of Schloss Vollrads. So if we don't sell it completely, it's actually not a problem. This is part of our wine library as well. So of course we put away a part of a certain amount of these bottles for the next generations here, Schloss Vollrads.
I think the consensus here with all of the comments coming through is that there's a few people that don't think the idea of leaving anything for the next generation is a good one when the wines are tasting this delicious. So there's been many comments on that. That's not a popular idea tonight, Christian.
Yeah, I know. I'm too altruistic sometimes.
Very good.
Yeah, no, you're right, of course. Now, I just wanted to say, I want to express the extreme longevity of the wine. So it's of course an option, and of course the nice important is in effect is important that this is what it is missing a little bit in Germany. The Germans, as I mentioned before, are focusing a little bit more on dry style wines, so they actually don't understand, or they don't perceive that much what they have of something very special here in Germany. Yeah, this wine category cannot be copied in any other corner of the world, and this is something very, very special, unique for Germany. And but the Germans themselves, they don't perceive that much. They're looking for they're missing the occasions. They're missing the occasions. Yeah, the occasion is Wednesday afternoon or evening, or Wednesday morning up to around the globe. Yeah, so let's open those wines and talk about them. This is the best occasion. No, jokes aside, I think of course occasion would be, for example, Christmas time or New Year's Eve or something like that. Yeah, so anniversaries, of course. Yeah, of course. Yeah, these are the occasions for those wines. Yeah, time machines. Yeah, bringing us back in the year of 2010. Yeah,
yeah, definitely. Very good.
Yeah.
Well, Christian, thank you very much. We've got some wonderful comments coming through here just on how enjoyable the tasting was. And I think, you know, you've shown us in 2 flights of wine of Rieslings in the last set, sort of what would perhaps have historically and more traditionally expected. And then in the first flight, really started with a look into some of the new styles that are coming through and some of what, you know, is going to be very exciting going forward from Schloss Vollrads and also from German wine. And I think, you know, German wine, when you have 1 or 2, you have a certain idea that's what it's about, and then you try a few more and you realize that there's a lot more to German wine than just 1 Spätlese. So you've demonstrated that very nicely again tonight. So tonight or this morning for you. So thank you very much for getting up early. And I should tell everyone that Christian got up even earlier. So he's already done 2 hours work because daylight savings around the globe is causing an issue. I need to actually communicate in GMT and then we'll be fine. So he's already been up for 2 hours, done a couple of hours work and then joined us. So thank you very much. And to everyone that's online tonight, thanks again for joining us. We'll send out an email tomorrow with a link through to the wines. But if you can't wait till tomorrow, they are all up on our website. We have just landed some stock recently. And Regan mentioned before, you know, there's some wines here that he hadn't tried. We have also extended the range. You know, the Schloss Vollrads wines are, you know, Riesling's not a massive category, but every time we bring them in, we tend to sell them out quicker than I notice. So this is probably one of our bigger shipments, but I'd hazard a guess we're going to still sell them out super quick. So, Christian, thank you. Regan, did you want to add anything to that? I'm sure you will. We'll just jump over to Regan for a second, Christian.
Yeah, that was fantastic, Christian, especially that first flight. I have to say that's my absolute favorite flight of dry Rieslings I've ever had.
Thank you very much.
It's not, as I said, not one of my favorite styles, especially the searing acidity kind of type style of dry Riesling. I love searing acidity and sweet Riesling, but not in dry. But those were beautiful and a real revelation in some of those wines as well. So I'll certainly be picking up some for myself.
Okay. Yeah, thank you much for your comment. Thank you.
And the Beerenauslers, we actually tried that with Roald. I think the last time he was in New Zealand, which was probably about 5 years ago now, not long after I think it was first released, and it's looking even better today. Just a fabulous wine. I think that 2010 vintage for you guys is just outrageously good.
10 years for this wine is like 1 year for a normal wine.
Yeah.
More or less. Thank you very much for all the people who have attended to this tasting, for taking the decision to be curious for our wines and to book this tasting. Thank you very much. I really appreciate that, to see that this was booked out, and we had the opportunity to show the little bit more for you newer style for the dry style wines, which is here in Germany more or less for more than 10, 15 years, the usual way for dry style wines in the meantime. But of course, it takes time to get around the globe. So this was a perfect occasion for this. Thank you very much. Yeah. And crossing the fingers for all of us for the next weeks and months, and hoping that vaccination is going process like we wish all in the next weeks. And I'm still waiting, for example, as well. I hope for New Zealand that they will receive the amounts of vaccines that they need to do the vaccination in the next weeks and months, hopefully. Yeah.
We do too. Thank
Yeah.
you, Christian, and thank you everyone very much for joining us.
You're welcome. And if by the way, of course, Schloss Vollrads is an open castle. So whenever you're supposed to travel again and able to travel again and want to see and to visit Schloss Vollrads, we are definitely an open castle. You can find me and my colleagues on the website. You can send us an email, and we do offer tastings and tours, and we are available for you on site as well. So this is a very I know it's a small possibility, but if it arrives, we're present. Okay.
Very good. Thank you. Thank
Bye-bye.
you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Cheers.
Bye. Yeah. Bye.
Bye.